Welcome back in Alive Now. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's cover the Middle East. Axios says that the IDF performed a highly unusual raid in Syria earlier this week, destroying an underground missile factory that Israel and the U.S. claim was built by Iran, according to three sources briefed on the operation. The IDF also sending out a tweet. Hal Kempfer is standing by, and Hal, the IDF put commando boots on the ground. That's not normal. This must have been an important target.
It was a hugely important target. Austin, this target was where they were building precision guided missiles that were going to Hezbollah that directly threaten Israel, but also are destabilizing for the entire Middle East. The missile site itself is right on the Syrian-Lebanese border. And so as they would build these missiles, they would quickly move them into Lebanon, into Hezbollah's hands, going down the Bekaa Valley, and it was very difficult for Israel to put missions on target or bombs on target in order to intercept those deliveries. Of course, they camouflage their movements, they do a lot of things, but it was built. The plant itself, the factory, was built inside a mountain, and the whole purpose of that was to build it in a facility that was impregnable, impregnable to airstrikes, I should say. And so they built it in this mountain. So what all the reports are that they came up with this rather elaborate raid where they used airstrikes to take out lines of communication or roads, ways that reinforcements could get into the site itself. And this was coordinated with a helicopter delivery of commandos that went way out over the Mediterranean, and then came back and into Syria, and that the commandos were dropped off by the helicopters while the commandos were doing their mission, actually getting inside the facility, doing something you see out of the movies, taking out the guards, all the other stuff, getting in there. There were drones overhead, and the drones were to basically to provide observation and surveillance, but also to take out any potential reinforcements coming in while they're in there. So they have this overhead drone coverage with armed drones to do that. And while they're in there, reportedly, they also ended up getting 2 to 4 engineers or scientists that they took with them. As of today, Iran is claiming that none of their personnel, none of their troops were captured in this thing, which I think makes it very interesting from an international law perspective. If you were an Al-Quds Iranian troop and you were captured in this thing and you're being held by the Israelis and your country disavows that you even exist, that would be a rather interesting legal status to be in. But they went in and they blew it up. Then they hit with airstrikes on the way out, which is that's a kind of a normal raid methodology. Is once you've done whatever you do, actions on the objective area, then you come in and you hit it with airstrikes again to kind of hide what you did, and also to keep everybody's heads down while you're getting out of there. And a rather extensive raid, very impressive. And one former U.S. Navy SEAL, career SEAL, was looking at this. He called it the kind of raid you dream about, because he said, look, you go in there, you're blowing stuff up, you got all this air cover, you have everything, you're going into this underground site, and at the same time, you don't have to worry about hostages, which, of course, if you're doing a hostage rescue raid, that's a very difficult operation, because you're trying to make sure you get in there and you get in there fast and in a way that doesn't threaten the hostages, because that's always a threat. In this case, no, it was something right out of the movies, something literally you could take out of the best of Hollywood, like the guns in Navarone or Where Eagles Dare.
And I should mention at the top, we showed that tweet. I don't think the IDF has taken, I don't think they've actually said that they carried this out. I don't think they've taken responsibility for this.
No, they have not.
Yeah, and so what we showed in that tweet earlier was some other activity that they've been doing in Syria. But I got to ask you, how big of a dent do operations like this put in Iran's bigger picture plans for the region?
It's interesting you ask that question, because it's tough for us to tell. We don't look at the same intelligence, obviously, that is being looked at in the most classified realm in the U.S., and certainly what's being looked at in Israel. this was obviously a big enough target that they were able to put that many uh, IDF soldiers, commando, special operations personnel at risk to go in there and take it out. I have a feeling that in the big matrix, this was a very important target because of what it was doing, producing those missiles, and taking it out was worth the risk. I also think that the intelligence they got out of this was probably invaluable. And I imagine that the intelligence they're going to get out, that they did get out, is going to pay a lot of dividends and looking at potentially other targets, but also potentially in going after Hezbollah's broader network in terms of how they move arms and personnel. It's only, it's really kind of a speculation game because we don't know what they got exactly. But certainly in a facility that secure, you can imagine that there was an assumption on the Iranians' part that this is a very secure facility, so this is someplace where they could archive or keep or work with certain highly sensitive, intelligence files, information, and of course, it got breached. It got completely compromised, if you will, from an Iranian perspective, and now the Israelis know about that, and I'm pretty sure that they're going to share that with some of their allies. So I imagine we're going to get some intelligence out of that, although with the caveat that, like many other things that the IDF does, they have not claimed responsibility for this raid. All right, but I think everyone pretty much assumes that's who did it because nobody else could.
Nobody else would. And the other thing, and they don't want to claim responsibility for it because that raises the stakes of some sort of retaliatory activity from the Syrian side, I believe. I got to ask you before we move on to the next subject, why does Iran need to build weapons in Syria? Why Syria?
It's closer. Otherwise, they got to fly them in. One of the things you deal with the geography of it. I mean, possibly, moving weapons, and this was always a challenge for Iran backing Hezbollah, because it's in southern Lebanon. How do you get those weapons from Iran to southern Lebanon? How do you get them in there? And you could fly them in and land in southern Lebanon. Traditionally, the way they would do it is you'd have a pipeline that would bring aircraft that would fly into Syria. They'd offload whatever it is, and then they'd move it across ground into southern Lebanon. And of course, when you're bringing in missile components and missiles, that's some pretty heavy loads. You can't bring in that much because of what you're doing. You also have to remember to fly that aircraft, you're having to fly over other people's airspace to include Iraqi airspace, but the U.S. is going to be monitoring everything going on there, or Jordanian airspace, possibly, or Kuwaiti or Saudi Arabian airspace. So there's a lot of issues that go on with how they move this. So they built this plant in Syria, right next to the border, in this mountain, because they said, look, logistically, that's just a lot easier to do, and we'll put our personnel in the facility in Syria. And so that's what they did. And and because of that, I'm going to go back to your original question: how important is it? I think it's probably a very important site, and that's why they did something rather this extensive and this elaborate in order to take it out.
I want to talk about ISIS with you. Of course, we heard about 4 leaders being taken out by U.S. forces. That happened last month. We have to take a quick break, Hal. Let's talk on the other side.